My name is Camille Renford, and I'm 29 years old. For 3 years, I believed I understood the shape and rhythm of my relationship with Daniel Hale. We lived together, shared routines, made plans without needing to label them as plans, and built the quiet, comfortable foundation I thought real love rested on. But that morning, something felt off the moment I stepped out of bed. The espresso machine sputtered out its final hiss, filling the apartment with the familiar scent of dark roast. I poured 2 shots into the ceramic mugs Daniel's sister had given us as a joke, hers and his written in looping gold script. It was the kind of harmless gift couples laughed about. Until that morning, when the joke stopped being funny. When I brought the mugs to the bedroom, Daniel was standing in front of the full-length mirror, evaluating himself with a seriousness I usually only saw when he had an important client meeting. He held up 2 shirts, a charcoal button-down, and a deep emerald one I didn't recognize. His attention was fixed entirely on his reflection, as if I hadn't entered the room at all. "Which one looks better?" he asked, still staring at himself. I tried to lighten the moment. "They both look fine, Daniel. It's just Lucas's birthday. Burgers, beer, backyard, you know the drill. You might be overdressed for a night like that." He finally glanced my way, and the slight sharpness in his expression made the hairs on my arms lift. "It's not about the party, Camille. It's about presence." He said it so simply, so matter-of-factly, as if the word explained everything. He chose the emerald shirt, then the charcoal again, switching with restless energy. I watched him confused. Presence for who? He ignored the question, taking the mug from my hand without eye contact. He sipped, then adjusted his collar as if he were preparing for something far more significant than a casual birthday gathering. The unease in my stomach tightened. Finally, without ceremony, he said, "Oh, by the way, I saw on Instagram that Serena's going to be there tonight." The name was a stone thrown into still water. Serena Quinn, his ex-girlfriend. The ex he'd described as volatile, dramatic, exhausting. The woman who, according to him, helped him realize what he never wanted again. I felt my breath pause for a moment. "Okay." And Daniel didn't hesitate. "I just don't want things to be awkward. She can be reactive. So for tonight, I think it's better if we just act like we're friends." For one second, one strangely calm second, the entire room went silent in my mind. I stared at him. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" He buttoned the charcoal shirt and inspected the result in the mirror. "Just for tonight, Camille. I don't want Serena to misunderstand anything or make a scene. It'll be less messy if you just act like we're friends. You understand, right?" His tone was almost instructional, practical, detached, as if he were asking me to pick up milk on the way home. My chest tightened, but my voice remained steady. "Less messy for who, Daniel?" He applied cologne, completely unbothered. "Don't be clingy about this." The word hit harder than the request. Clingy. It reframed my hurt as irrational, my confusion as weakness. It took the emotional violence of his request and shifted the blame onto me as if I were the unreasonable one. I watched him closely, then really watched him. His focus wasn't on preventing awkwardness. It wasn't on protecting me. It was on crafting an image, preparing himself for Serena's eyes. He wanted to appear unburdened, desirable, available. The realization was quiet but devastating. 3 years of shared memories, whispered conversations, late-night reassurances, all swept aside so he could perform for a woman he supposedly no longer cared about. My silence stretched long enough that he finally looked at me through the mirror. There was no remorse in his eyes, no hesitation, just expectation. I swallowed the heaviness in my throat and felt something inside me shift, not break, but settle. A clarity I didn't ask for but couldn't ignore. "Okay," I said finally. Daniel's shoulders relaxed with relief. He kissed the air near my cheek, careful not to smudge his cologne. "I knew you'd understand. You're always so reasonable." He grabbed his chosen shirt and left for the bathroom to change, humming a tune that felt absurdly out of place. I stood in the middle of the bedroom, holding a mug that had gone cold in my hands, realizing I had just agreed to disappear for an evening, not because he was afraid of conflict, but because he wanted freedom. A knock sounded at the door. "That's Leo," Daniel called casually from the bathroom. "Can you get it?" I placed the mug down, steadied my breath, and walked toward the door. The night hadn't even begun yet. The ending had already taken root. This was the moment my relationship shifted into something I could no longer pretend to recognize. The noise from Lucas Brenner's backyard hit us before we even stepped onto the patio. Music thumped heavily from a portable speaker. People were clustered around a long folding table covered in drinks, and someone had already started a competition involving far too much tequila for the time of night. It was the kind of messy, uncoordinated gathering where nobody cared how they looked, except apparently for Daniel. The moment we arrived, he slipped into the crowd with an almost eager energy, the type he usually reserved for work events or professional networking. I followed at a slower pace, lingering near the patio's edge with my drink. The friend role he assigned me hovered over everything like a fog I couldn't shake. I tried not to watch him, but my eyes betrayed me. Daniel positioned himself near the sliding glass door, scanning the crowd with subtle impatience. He wasn't looking for Lucas, he wasn't looking for me, he was waiting for her. And right on cue, Serena Quinn stepped out of the house. She looked effortlessly put together, hairstyled in loose waves, makeup dewy and soft clothes, casual but curated. She had that natural magnetism that made people shift unconsciously to give her space a blend of confidence and practiced charm that suggested she knew exactly how to enter a room. Daniel straightened immediately. His posture changed. His tone changed. His entire presence shifted toward her like he'd been preparing for this moment all evening. Serena didn't even look at him. She walked right past, greeting another group of friends with a bright smile. Daniel laughed loudly at something, hoping she might turn. She didn't. I took a sip of my drink, letting the cold liquid settle the knot in my stomach. I didn't feel jealousy. I felt something worse, recognition. I was watching a performance, and I wasn't part of the audience he cared about impressing. Camille, a voice said beside me. I turned to find Leo Hart Daniel's closest friend. He wore a simple navy pullover and jeans, blending into the party effortlessly. There was nothing performative about him. He carried a calm, grounded energy that made you feel steadier just by standing near him. You good? He asked, studying my face with genuine concern. I'm fine, I said, though the lie was thin. Leo raised an eyebrow. You've been standing in the exact same spot for about 20 minutes, and Daniel hasn't looked over here once. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Leo spent enough time around Daniel to notice things. He shifted closer, not invading my space, just positioning himself where he could hear me over the music. Did something happen between you two tonight? I hesitated, then exhaled. What was the point in hiding it? Daniel asked me to act like we're just friends tonight, I said quietly, because Serena is here. Leo's expression darkened instantly. His reaction wasn't theatrical, it was controlled, but unmistakably angry. He said that to you. I nodded. He ran a hand over his jaw, clearly restraining whatever he wanted to say. That's not okay, Camille. It doesn't matter, I murmured. I agreed. That doesn't make it okay. Leo's voice took on a quiet intensity. That's not space or boundaries. That's him trying to make you invisible, so he can test something with his ex. Hearing someone else say it made my chest tighten in a way I hadn't expected. I forced a slow breath. Maybe he just didn't want drama. Leo shook his head. You're giving him excuses he doesn't deserve. He didn't want you clinging to him because he didn't want Serena to know he's taken. He paused, then added more gently. You know that, right? I looked toward Daniel. He was hovering near Serena's group, now laughing too loudly at jokes he clearly wasn't involved in. Every now and then he would glance over at her with a hopeful flicker in his expression. She didn't give him a second of attention. Leo watched the same scene unfold. He's humiliating himself, he muttered. I don't know what he's doing, I said softly. You do, Leo replied. You're just trying not to admit it. I didn't respond. Instead, I stared at the condensation on my plastic cup, feeling the numbness take root again. Leo shifted his stance slightly to block me from the line of vision of other partygoers, almost like a shield. Camille, you deserve someone who doesn't treat you like background noise. The words struck deep because they weren't flattery. They weren't romantic. They were just the truth. The crowd erupted with laughter again as someone spilled beer everywhere. The music got louder. My head felt heavy, as though the night had stretched far beyond its hours. Leo watched me for a moment. Do you want to get out of here? I hesitated. Not because of Daniel, that tether had already frayed, but because I didn't know if leaving was an act of surrender or an act of clarity. Leo didn't push. You don't have to stay just because it's Lucas's party. His eyes softened. And Daniel hasn't checked on you once. I looked over at Daniel. He was now leaning closer to Serena's friend group, trying and failing to be included. Serena excused herself and walked away, leaving Daniel momentarily alone, blinking after her like he'd lost his script. The sight didn't hurt me. It didn't inflame anything in me. It just confirmed what I had already felt in the bedroom hours earlier. Whatever this version of Daniel was, whatever game he was playing, I was not part of it. I think I've had enough, I said. Leo nodded once. Let's go. We walked through this house, quietly avoiding the denser parts of the party. When we stepped outside toward the driveway, the night air felt cooler and clearer, like a fresh breath after being underwater too long. Leo didn't ask if I was sure. He didn't treat me like a fragile thing. He simply followed my lead, matching my pace. When we reached my car, he paused beside the passenger door. If you'd rather I call a rideshare, I don't mind. I shook my head. I want to drive you. He accepted this with a soft, appreciative nod and got into the car. As I started the engine, the headlights washed across the house, and I saw Daniel. He had just stepped outside, his eyes darting across the yard, scanning for someone. When he saw my car, his expression shifted sharply. Confusion tightened into disbelief. Then his focus slid to the passenger seat where Leo sat quietly. Daniel's face froze. I didn't roll down the window. I didn't wave. I didn't mouth an explanation. I simply drove forward, the gravel crunching beneath the tires, the party fading behind us as the night swallowed the last remnants of what Daniel had assumed would be waiting for him. The drive home was peaceful. Leo didn't pry or offer empty platitudes. We talked about light things, books, music, work, frustrations, letting the normalcy wash away the heaviness of the evening. Back in my apartment, I handed Leo one of my oversized shirts before he settled onto the couch. He accepted it with quiet gratitude, and we talked until exhaustion softened both our voices. At some point, he drifted off to sleep, and I soon followed, curled up in an armchair across from him. When morning came, sunlight streamed into the apartment, filling the space with bright, clean warmth. The apartment felt different, quieter, lighter, as if the night had emptied something heavy out of the walls. Leo was still asleep on the couch, breathing evenly peaceful. For a moment, I simply stood there, observing the stillness, the safety, the lack of tension. It was the most grounded I had felt in months. I moved to the kitchen, cracked eggs into a pan, and let the simple rhythm of cooking fill the quiet space. Then the doorbell rang, a rapid, urgent, intrusive sound that snapped through the calm. Leo stirred awake. I turned off the stove. We exchanged one look. We both knew exactly who it was. I walked to the door, steadied myself, and opened it. Daniel stood on the threshold, a man unraveling, desperate, and carrying the consequences of the night he created. Daniel stood on my doorstep, looking like he'd been dragged through the emotional wreckage of the night before. His hair was a mess, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes rimmed red. But beneath all of that, what struck me most was the desperation, the frantic hope that I might still be the person who could soothe him, stabilize him, clean up whatever mess he'd made. Camille, he breathed like the sound of my name alone might save him. Please, I need to talk to you. He moved to step inside by instinct, but I didn't move. I didn't step back. I didn't open the door wider. I simply stayed still, holding the frame. The realization hit him in seconds. The old automatic access was gone. His confusion flickered into hurt, then into something pleading. Can I come in? He asked, voice cracking. No, I said, but you can talk from there. His mouth dropped open, slightly startled by the boundary he'd never encountered from me before. He tried to recover with a ragged breath. Camille last night was... Everything went wrong. Serena, she just ignored me completely. She acted like I didn't exist. I tried talking to her. I tried being civil. I tried. He ran a shaking hand through his hair. It was humiliating. He didn't mention me. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't even acknowledge the request he'd made that led to all of it. It was all about what he felt. As he rambled, something in his expression shifted sharply. His gaze, chaotic and panicked, slid past me into the apartment behind. And froze. Leo was standing a few feet back in one of my oversized gray shirts, shoulders relaxed but alert. His presence wasn't aggressive, it was steady calm, unshakable, the kind of quiet strength that didn't need to announce itself. Everything in Daniel's face ruptured at once. The color drained from his cheeks, then flooded back as a blotchy, furious red. What? His voice splintered. What is he doing here? I answered calmly. He slept on the couch. Daniel's breath caught. In your shirt. Leo spoke before I could. I didn't think it would matter. Considering you told her to pretend she wasn't your girlfriend. Daniel whipped towards me in disbelief. You told him... I didn't have to, I replied. You made it obvious. His expression shifted wildly. Shock, rage, confusion, denial. Camille, this is insane. You're twisting everything. I asked you to act like friends for one night because Serena would have caused drama. That's all. And now you... He threw a shaky hand in Leo's direction. Now he's here in your clothes. This is betrayal. The word hit the air like something flung in desperation. I kept my voice even. Daniel, you told me to erase our relationship so you could see how Serena might respond to you being available. That wasn't about avoiding drama. That was about keeping your options open. His jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle twitching. That's not fair. You don't understand. I just needed clarity, closure, something. So you used me to get it, I asked. He stepped closer, the panic rising in his voice. No, I needed to figure things out before committing even deeper, before everything. He blinked rapidly as if trying to summon sincerity. Camille, I made a mistake. We can get past this. We just need to talk. Please let me in. Behind me, Leo didn't move, didn't speak, didn't change expression. He simply remained present, not interfering, but not leaving. Daniel noticed, and it broke something in him. You're letting him stand there. You're letting him see this? His voice cracked. He's supposed to be my friend. Leo finally spoke, voice calm and firm. I am your friend. That's why I'm here, because I saw what you did, and because she deserved better than being paraded around like a prop while you tried to impress your ex. Daniel stared at him like the world had tilted. You're taking her side. There's only one side when someone gets hurt, Leo replied. Daniel turned back to me, desperation spilling over. Camille, come on, don't do this. Don't end everything over one night, please. I took a breath, steady and sure. Daniel last night didn't end our relationship. It revealed it. He went still, completely still. Then his expression twisted into something sharp and defensive. Of course. Of course it's my fault. You're perfect. He's perfect. I'm the villain. His voice cracked again. You think you're better than me now because he spent one night on your couch? My reply was simple. This isn't about him. I stepped forward just enough that the hallway light caught my face. It's about the fact that you didn't choose me when it mattered. And now I'm choosing myself. For a moment, he just stared, his breathing hitched. His eyes glistened with something between heartbreak and disbelief. Then the anger returned, bitter, brittle, flailing. Fine, go ahead. You two deserve each other. You're pathetic. And he pointed at Leo with trembling fury. He's a replacement, a rebound, Leo's voice cut through the hallway like a clean blade. She doesn't need a rebound. She needs respect. Daniel's face twisted, then broke. He stepped back, blinking rapidly, completely undone. I can't believe this, he whispered. I can't believe you'd throw me away. I'm not throwing you away, I said quietly. I'm letting you go. He shut his eyes as if the sentence physically struck him. Then he turned, shoulders slumped, and walked down the hallway without another word. His footsteps faded until the building swallowed them whole. I stood there for a long moment before closing the door. Not slamming, not locking with fury. Just closing it. A soft final click that sounded like the end of a long, painful chapter. When I turned around, Leo was watching me with quiet concern. Are you okay? For the first time in a very long time, my answer wasn't a practiced smile or a hollow nod. Yes, I said, I really am. The morning light spilled across the apartment, warm and steady. The leftover scrambled eggs were still on the stove. The space felt different, lighter, grounded, fully mine again. And I breathed. The moment the door clicked softly shut behind Daniel, I stood still for a few seconds, letting the quiet settle. My pulse was steady, not racing the way it used to whenever conflict brushed too close. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't unraveling. I was simply grounded. Clear. It was almost unsettling how calm I felt after watching a 3-year relationship fracture openly on my doorstep. Leo remained near the kitchen, watching me carefully, as if waiting to see whether I needed to sit down or scream or cry. I didn't need any of those things. Instead, I crossed the living room and leaned against the counter, steadying myself with one deep breath. You handled that, Leo said after a moment. His voice carried neither surprise nor praise, more an acknowledgement of how completely different this morning's version of me was from the woman who had walked into the party last night. Most people would have broken down halfway through. I think I already did, I replied quietly. Just not today. He nodded in understanding. Last night, the moment I'd said okay in the bedroom, the moment I'd watched Daniel posture for Serena, the moment I realized his loyalty was conditional, fragile, and self-serving. The breaking hadn't happened in the confrontation. The confrontation was only the confirmation. I moved to turn the stove back on, intending to finish the breakfast I started before the doorbell knocked everything sideways. Leo stepped closer, not blocking me, but positioning himself where he could help if I needed anything. The domestic normalcy of it, 2 people in a quiet kitchen after an emotional storm, felt strangely comforting. Before I could reach for the spatula, Leo spoke again. Camille, if at any point you want me to go, just say the word. I don't want to make this any heavier. You're not making it heavy, I said. You're actually the only thing keeping it from feeling heavy. He absorbed that quietly. Still, I want to respect whatever space you need. There it was again, respect. A word Daniel had somehow managed to use often, but rarely practice. With Leo, I didn't have to work to be understood. I didn't have to take up less space to keep the peace. I didn't have to anticipate backlash. Leo simply listened, responded, adjusted. Nothing more, nothing less. I went back to the stove, cracked the heat up again, and stirred the eggs that had cooled into a soft yellow mound. The simple motion steadied me. Leo stayed near the counter, giving me room, but ready if my hands shook or I needed a moment. They didn't. I felt strangely capable, as if reclaiming my kitchen also meant reclaiming a part of myself. A knock suddenly rattled the door again, sharp, insistent, completely unlike the desperate pounding Daniel had delivered minutes before. I froze. Leo's head snapped up, expression instantly alert. He moved toward the hallway but kept a polite distance, clearly wanting me to take the lead. Another knock came harder this time, like someone with authority, rather than emotional panic. Camille called a familiar voice. "It's Lucas!" Relief washed through me, though I had no idea why Lucas would show up at my apartment this early. I opened the door a crack, and he stood on the hallway, runner hair still damp from a shower, holding 2 to-go coffees in his hands. "Hey," he said, exhaling in obvious stress. "Daniel didn't come home. He left the party last night and disappeared. I've been calling him for hours." I blinked. He was just here. Lucas's eyes widened. Here, this morning. Yes, he came about 15 minutes ago. Lucas closed his eyes briefly, pinching the bridge of his nose. God. Of course he did. He was already spiraling at the party after Serena brushed him off. I tried talking to him, but he wouldn't listen to anyone. I stepped aside so Lucas could walk in. His eyes landed briefly on Leo, who lifted a hand in a polite greeting. Lucas let out a slow breath. Okay, this makes more sense now. Daniel called me 5 times after sunrise, rambling about how he lost everything and how he ruined his chances. I assumed he meant Serena. Lucas glanced between us, but he meant you. He made his choices, I said simply. Lucas nodded. I know, and I'm not here to defend him. I just wanted to make sure you were safe. He sounded unhinged. The word unhinged made my stomach twist, not because I feared Daniel would harm me, but because it solidified how far off the rails he had gone in his desperation to recapture something he never valued properly in the first place. I'm fine, I assured him. Leo stayed last night. He's been here the whole time. Lucas's expression softened slightly. Good. You shouldn't have been alone for that. He placed one of the coffees on the table, took a step back, and gave me a long, measured look, the kind that silently asks if you're truly okay. I'm sorry, Camille, he said. You didn't deserve any of this. Thank you, I replied. And for the first time since everything began, I actually meant it without feeling hollow. Lucas left after a few more minutes, promising to check on Daniel and keep him away until emotions cooled. When the door shut behind him, I found Leo watching me again, but this time with a softer, almost relieved gaze. You handled that too, he said. Better than most people would. Maybe I'm getting good at this, I said with a small smile. Leo didn't smile back immediately. Instead, he studied me with quiet sincerity. No, you're just finally giving yourself permission to stop carrying everything alone. His words landed in a place I hadn't let anyone reach in a long time. I picked up the warm coffee Lucas left and took a slow sip. Steam curled into the morning light, drifting through the blinds. The apartment felt different again, lighter, calmer, freer. Ready to eat? I asked, turning back to the stove. Leo nodded. Yeah, ready whenever you are. As I plated the eggs and set 2 forks on the counter, I realized something simple, undeniable, and quietly profound. For the first time in years, the peace in my home and in myself wasn't fragile. It was earned, solid, mine. The rest of the morning unfolded in a way I never could have predicted the night before, quiet, steady, and strangely gentle. The eggs finished cooking. The kitchen warmed with soft sunlight, and for the first time in far too long, there was no tension hiding in the corners of the apartment. No invisible pressure. No waiting for the next emotional shift from someone who didn't know how to value steadiness. Leo helped me set out 2 plates. He didn't hover, didn't ask if I was sure about anything, didn't tiptoe around me as if I were fragile glass waiting to crack. He simply moved in tandem with me, wordlessly respectful of my space, but present when needed. The simplicity of it felt grounding in a way I didn't realize I'd been craving. We sat at the counter, eating quietly. Every so often, Leo glanced at me with that subtle evaluating look. He had the one that made him seem painfully observant without ever crossing into intrusive. I didn't mind it. In fact, it was the first time in a long time I didn't feel judged for the way I processed things. When we finished, I washed the dishes while Leo dried them. It felt almost domestic, but not in a way that implied something romantic or rushed. It was simply two people cooperating, existing easily in the same space. A contrast to the strained choreography Daniel and I had fallen into long before last night. After we finished cleaning up, Leo leaned against the counter. So, what happens now? The question wasn't loaded. There was no ulterior motive behind it. It wasn't a push for a decision or a hint at something more. He was simply giving me the space to define my own next step. I took a breath, looking around the apartment, the place Daniel and I had shared, the place where small resentments had accumulated in corners where unspoken expectations had settled into the walls. Now it felt like the weight of all that had finally begun to lift. What happens now, I said slowly, is that I figure out what my life looks like without Daniel in it. Leo nodded. And whatever that looks like, you'll be okay. There was no pity in his voice, no false reassurance. Just a simple truth stated plainly. I leaned back against the counter. I feel like part of me knew this was coming for a long time. I just didn't want to admit it. That happens to a lot of people, he replied. Loyalty makes us stay long after the love has stopped feeling mutual. That line hit harder than I expected because it was exactly what I had been doing. Loving someone long after he stopped reciprocating in the ways that mattered. Daniel hadn't stopped loving me entirely, but he had stopped choosing me. And that makes all the difference. Leo set the dish towel aside. Do you want me to head out for a bit? Give you time, or I can stay if you'd rather not be alone. The offer was gentle, not assuming anything, not leaning toward any emotional outcome. Just respect again, in 100 subtle ways that felt new. You can stay, I said, if you don't mind. I don't, he answered easily. Not at all. We moved to the living room. Leo sat on the couch, legs stretched out, while I settled into the armchair across from him. The morning light drifted across the room in soft patches, warming everything it touched. The quiet felt natural, not forced. We didn't rush to fill the silence. We simply existed in it. After a while, Leo spoke again. You know, for what it's worth, I'm proud of you. I blinked, proud. You didn't let him manipulate the narrative this time. You didn't let him rewrite your reactions or guilt you into carrying his emotional mess. That takes strength. The compliment startled something in me, not because he said it, but because I realized how unfamiliar the sentiment was. Daniel rarely acknowledged emotional strength unless it benefited him. With Leo, it was different, clean, honest, without agenda. Thank you, I said quietly. Eventually, Leo stood and stretched. I should get going. You probably need a real break today. You can come by later if you want, I offered before thinking. He paused, surprised, but not uncomfortable, if you're sure. I am. He nodded. Okay, then I will. I walked him to the door. As he stepped out into the hallway, he gave me a small, grounded smile, warm but not lingering. Just enough to let me know he was in my corner without expecting anything in return. Take care of yourself today, he said. I will. When the door closed behind him, I stood in the entryway for a while, listening to the quiet. Not the hollow quiet of avoidance or the tense quiet of unspoken conflict, but the calm, steady quiet that comes from peace. I turned back toward the apartment, the place where everything had fractured, and the place where everything was slowly beginning to rebuild. This time on different terms. My own terms. I walked to the kitchen, reheated the leftover eggs just because I could, opened the curtains to let in more sunlight, and sat at the counter with my breakfast and a fresh cup of coffee. For the first time in years, my chest felt open, spacious, not waiting for someone else to take up the emotional oxygen, not adjusting myself around another person's instability, not shrinking, just breathing, just living, just being. And as the morning settled around me, with quiet confidence, I realized something profoundly simple. Daniel leaving wasn't the end of my life. It was the end of losing myself in someone else's. The future wasn't a question mark anymore. It was a wide open door. And I was already walking through it,